Welcome to the Creative Warriors Podcast, the female heart and soul of photography. Hello, this is Ariel with the Creative Warriors Podcast. We had a little snafu as I was recording this with Kaisa, so we're going to just jump right into this episode. Here you go, Kaisa.
No problem. You asked earlier, how did I get over the kind of resistance that people have towards ICM photography and asking, why do you do these blurry things? And I just realized that the experience having worked at a newspaper has helped in that a lot. Because when you do news work, it's very fast paced. Wherever you go, you have to get something out that can be published in tomorrow's paper. It's not always good work at all, but you still have to put it out there. You have to put it out in print. And it may be that you are standing in a very wrong place. I'm here and the event takes place in the wrong corner. And whatever can happen, sometimes you can get great images and sometimes you get bad images, but they are still published. And I remember the first year, it was terrible because you were so ashamed that, oh no, the picture I took yesterday, it's really terrible. It's horrible and it's still in print. But then you kind of get used to the idea that nothing is as old as yesterday's newspaper. And once you are in that situation a lot, you start to stand mediocrities.
Okay.
And you kind of start to stand the idea that people might question. People might say that, okay, the picture in the newspaper wasn't so great, or it was a bad one. But it's still there and no one remembers anymore tomorrow what it was like. So that might have helped me also in my ICM career. You know, I've been able to withstand, this is something I produced. You may not like it, but so what? It may be that it's helped me. I think so.
Yeah, I could see that it would allow you to work through a lot of those pieces because you're not in control necessarily of the end result because you hand it to a newspaper. And do they choose which image they're going to use, or do you choose?
They choose you.
Yeah. So I mean, you don't have, once you hand them your ability to say it's done and finished and my best work is not a part of that equation.
Yeah. And also it can simply be that you are in the wrong place. Like, I remember the very first year I worked at the newspaper, President George W. Bush came to Finland. And of course, it was a huge media event. And he went to visit our president, and media was allowed 2 minutes outside the building where they met when they were greeting. You know, first they saw each other and shook hands, and that was media's 2 minutes there. And I went there like tomorrow, and I had this nightmare during the night that it's raining and everyone is having an umbrella, and I don't see the guys because the umbrellas are, covering everything. And then I woke up and it was pouring rain.
Oh
no! And I was like, oh, great. My dream came true. But luckily the rain stopped and that didn't happen. But it could have happened. It could have been that you absolutely didn't see the guy,
that I could see that happening out of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
You probably have a press pass, but that doesn't always get you where you need to be, right?
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And you may be told that they shake hands here, but then at the last minute they decide to shake hands somewhere totally different. And you didn't see them. Yeah. And you go back to the office and you have to put something in tomorrow's paper. You can't say that, oh, our photographer was there, but she didn't see the guy, so you don't see an image. Right.
Okay, so let's talk about some more elements that you use in your creative work. What about balance and tension? Is that something that you talked about this actually? An image has to be balanced. So, and in that balance, sometimes there's tension versus calm. Do you tend to choose calm versus tension?
I don't think so. I think from all the geometric shapes that are in the image, diagonal lines, that's where I create the tension.
Okay.
Tension doesn't mean only like a negative, tough feeling.
Right.
Tension is like a glue in the image that makes it be flexible, but it keeps it together. So I find tension positive, and I think in that respect, I go after tension. And calm. If we think of composition and we talk about calmness, then the image is very stable and it can be boring. But if we think about the movement that the camera has created, that I like to be calm. So I kind of find calmness in two different perspectives.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. But
how have you trained your eye to see those elements in your work? So to see the balance and to see is it just something that you were intuitive with, or have you worked at that through the years?
I think it's both, but when I studied, we did a lot of studio work.
Okay.
And we had to recreate, for example, we would take cosmetics advertisements from magazines, lipsticks and perfume bottles and whatnot.
Okay.
Ads that had been published in magazines, we would have to replicate those in studio. I hated it. But it was really good training for your eye, because it really, if you take these ads that are really well done, everything is in peace there. Everything is just where it's supposed to be. Everything is in balance, and every single item that's in the picture has a purpose. And the distances between the objects, etc., they have a purpose and so on. So when you replicate that, when you build it and you learn to look through the viewfinder, you learn a lot. You really learn a lot about the perspective and the relationship with objects of one another. And if one is too big, the other one is too small, do you have to move them around? How do you move them around? How does the light affect?
Are they merging?
Are they merging? Is there something sticking out of the head?
Yeah.
So that was very good training, really good training. I didn't like it at all, but now come to think of it, that was one way of learning how objects and elements need to be in balance in the picture. And we did the same. We had to also do a lot of that black and white, the masters of black and white, like Eugene W. Smith and Ansel Adams and
right.
and Edward Weston and so on. We had to also study their works so that we looked at their image and then we tried to create a grayscale, cut out of paper, black, gray, white, cut pieces out of paper to recreate the grayscale of that image on a sheet of paper.
Oh, wow.
And that is also a really good exercise to train your eye to see how the light changes and the gradation of going from gray to dark or gray to white. And that also helps you in analyzing the image itself and the composition and the balance and all the elements. So I think that has helped a lot. But for me, it also is quite intuitive. I kind of have an eye for it. I don't know why, but...
And I think some people do. I think some people see naturally. Other people can learn it. But I think there are people who see naturally.
Yeah.
Like I remember my son, when he was a little kid, he grabbed my phone. He was like 3 or 4 years old, and he was walking around the house and taking pictures with my, camera on the phone. Yeah. And I was looking at the pictures, and they were very well composed for a child who knew nothing about anything,
Yeah.
Still potty training, so we know what he knew.
Yeah.
But he could frame well. Exactly. Without any training whatsoever.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But also I do painting.
Okay.
I'm not good at all, but that helps you a lot with building the image. When you have a blank canvas and you start to add things there, and it's two-dimensional right away. Whereas in the studio, you might have a blank table and you start to bring objects in front of your camera, but it's still three-dimensional as you're working at it. So that helps. That helps a lot as well.
Yeah, I know a lot of photographers who also look at, different artists through the years and how they use light and how they composed, and looking at the ones that have preceded in the worlds of art have given us a lot of information, and even just filling your mind with their images then impacts how we implement that out in the field. Mm-hmm. We don't even know there's a connection, but it's in there.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it's in there working.
Yeah.
So what about energy? How do you like to use with ICM? There can be, or it can be smooth, but there's an element of energy in a lot of ICM that I love. But how do you personally use, like you talked about your series with the dancers? That has to have a lot of energy in it, I would imagine. I haven't seen it yet, but visually I could see just using a dancer, there's a lot of energy, but it's a very soft energy sometimes. So how do you use energy in your work?
I think the first source is color.
Okay.
So oranges, yellows, reds, those energetic colors, they bring the essence of energy. And then light, and the way light moves across the frame, that brings energy as well. The direction, how it moves, if it goes up and down or if it goes sideways, it has a different feel of energy in it. So you can use that when you are building your image, depending what you want to convey.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of energy, I think light plays a more important role than maybe some other factors.
Okay.
Like if you have this big swoosh of light coming in, I can't help but feeling energy walking into the frame,
Right. Whereas if it's more muted and soft.
Yeah. But I myself get a lot of energy from just doing the creative work. And I guess successful images, they generate even more energy. You want to do more. If you think that you've succeeded something good, then you want to try some more and some more. It's kind of a rat race.
It is kind of, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of a spinning wheel that, I'll try one more and one more and one more. But definitely, I think color comes first in terms of energy. Choosing the strong colors.
Okay. What about the things like perspective, scale, and then depth? The illusion of depth. If you, those are very, very similar tools, so to speak. So how does that play? And again, it might depend on the emotion you're trying to create. But say you were trying to create something that was showing pick an emotion that you like to work with a lot.
Well, energy definitely is one. Joy, power.
Okay. So pick like power, because that one might be harder to illustrate sometimes, depending on what you're doing.
But I have maybe 2 years ago, I try to work at words which would describe me and my art and the connection between the two.
Okay.
And I came to this visualizing the unseen. I have 4 words, and the 4th one is visualizing the unseen. And that's something I really want to do more, like we spoke earlier about the metamorphosis and transitioning one into another. But I think in order to create that, in order to visualize the unseen, depth works as a key element, and layers in the image. And I'm not talking about layers in Photoshop, but layers, different light layers or texture layers in the image itself.
Which create depth.
And that can create a message. So I think depth it has many meanings in the image itself, but it's a very important word to describe what the image may have. And I've realized that I have to learn and improve a lot in my longer exposure techniques, because the longer the exposure is, the more control I have of my movements, the longer movements I can do. Say if I have half a second exposure, everything happens really fast and a bit arbitrary. But if I have a 10-second exposure, I really have time to concentrate and focus that I want to move my camera this way or that way. And I want to sweep the light from the left-hand corner diagonally across the image, or straight or vertically across the image. And that creates those layers. And if you're able to create with the light different layers, you create the depth. And what's behind the layers? There can be a person or a feeling or an emotion or a movement or a message or whatever can be there behind those layers. So I find depth really important. Layers and depth, dimension. It's a new dimension altogether for photography. It's a dimension that you don't see with your bare eye.
Right.
But the ICM image brings it all visible all of a sudden.
Yeah. Do you work with like multiple exposures in that longer sense? Do you multiple sweep, or do you is it more of a more steady, gentle sweep?
I don't work with multiple exposures at all.
Okay.
Not in camera, not in Photoshop.
Okay.
So everything is single exposure. If it's a 10-second, it can be multiple moves and multiple sweeps, but it's all one single image.
Okay.
But if I have a 10-second exposure, I definitely have 2 or 3 different movements there.
Okay.
Plus holding the camera still first in the beginning.
I'm going to have to try that technique. That sounds really fun, actually.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, I would imagine it is. But it's got more of the thing I like about ICM personally is there's a painting feel to what I'm doing. Like you're painting the scene. And, now with mirrorless cameras, you can see at least on some level what's happening as you're doing it. Right. Yeah. So you can kind of, play, because to me that would be play in the beginning. And then hopefully I'd be shooting in the dark. But that's, that's how you learn, right? That's how you explore.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the only way to learn, is to just experiment. Do you know the Swedish photographer Erik Malm?
No, I do not.
Okay. Well, have a look at his work, because he's a master on these long exposures.
Okay. What's his last name?
Malm. Malm.
Oh, okay. All right. I will put that on my...
Yeah. And he has been training these long exposures like for 20 years, and he's really a master. And when you look at his images, you don't immediately think that they are ICM. You think more that they are multiple exposures.
Okay.
But they are not. They are all single exposures. But I've learned a lot from him. And I was lucky enough that he was on my trip to South Georgia. So I was able to spy him a little bit.
That's how we learn. We glean from people like you who are experts in their fields. That's how we all grow.
Yeah. But Eric's core idea is that he keeps the camera still first to get something very sharp and detailed, and then he does the movements. And in order to do that, you have to have a longer exposure time. And I'm talking like 6, 10, 15 seconds or whatever that is.
I did that actually, something similar without knowing what I was doing. I was just playing. But in Acadia, I did I was hand holding and with a very long exposure. So obviously it's not perfect, but I zoomed about halfway through. So I had the zoom movement, which normally I don't like. I think it's kind of, I don't know. It doesn't appeal to me, but it was a sunrise. So there was just something about the stillness, but then the movement that made this one image really work. And I was like, well, that's a kind of a fun technique that I hadn't ever tried before. So again, of course, I'll try it again. When the situation fits, right?
When you do the zooming very slowly, you lose these strikes that normally come into the image because your hand is shaking all the time a little bit.
Right.
And then the zoom movement and your handshake, they blend into one another.
Oh.
So you don't get these specific special effect lines that you usually get if you go quick zoom. And that they are very appealing, those images can be. Try it again.
I will try it again.
Yeah, and
nice
use like
tip there.
8 to 10 second time and go really, really slowly, but allow your hand to move whatever it naturally moves. Not deliberate, but it moves naturally a little bit anyway. So you can get some really nice results. So it's
a softness rather than the harsh.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Try that.
Nice. So when you're framing a scene, there's an element, and you talked about this before, but you talked about including and excluding in your image, in that frame.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things and the questions you ask yourself too? I think that's one of the things a lot of us aren't as good at. We tend to have distractions, and then we see it when we pull it onto the camera. So when you're in the field and you're looking through that viewfinder, how have you trained yourself, or what are some of those things that you can get rid of the things that you want out of that frame? Do you just keep positioning yourself? What are the things you do to get that scene crisp and clean subject-wise?
I think there's 3. One is positioning yourself. The second one is which lens are you using? So if you use a longer lens, you automatically close things out.
Okay. Versus a wide.
Yeah. And then the third one is the movement you're using. So if there is like a tree branch in a corner and you don't want it to be there, then you use a movement that goes opposite. If the tree branch is vertical, you use a horizontal movement so it dissolves into the background more. So
very nice. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So if you can't move it, you move it so it goes away.
Yeah. So maybe the combination of those 3. But of course, if I take 15 images of the same, at least 10 of them have something that's disturbing. It doesn't work. I'm not saying that every single image I take is good and works and is in balance and doesn't have distractions. But when you pay attention to them, then you know what to do. You know how to solve the problem when you first see it and you pay attention to the whole frame.
Right.
But I shoot a lot with a long lens.
Okay. How long, just out of curiosity?
70 to 200 or 100 to 400.
Okay.
Those are the ones that use the most.
Okay.
Yeah. So that automatically closes out quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. You can isolate a scene much better that way.
Yeah. You can concentrate on a smaller area.
Okay. So what do you think the difference is between, and how would you explain this to others when you focus? Obviously, you focus in a camera. Even ICM, usually there's some element of focus, but then there's focusing our eyes' attention in a photograph. So how would you explain how to focus the eye rather than just worrying about ICM doesn't necessarily have a point of focus, but you did say that sometimes there is some hook or a subject or a piece in the that's identifiable in your work. So how would you share that?
First of all, technically, I always focus, always. Even if the end result is completely abstract, I have always focused. And if my picture hasn't been focused, it's immediately trash. The bin, immediately. It's gone. I don't keep them. I hate pictures that are not in focus. So technically always focus, because it shows in the ICM image if it has been focused or not. If it's not focused, it's soft, blurry. All the lines that you have are too soft. But if you do focus, if there is a line or a shape, even if it's not representational, it's defined. Let's
Okay.
put it this way.
Okay.
And it's much more pleasing to look at. And it can become the hook. But then if there is an element that I want the viewer to look at, if you mean that focusing, it's about being able to place that element in a certain spot in the composition. So if you have the element right in the middle, it usually makes the image quite stable and uninteresting and a bit boring.
Yep.
But if you use the rule of thirds and you place the element on where the lines
intersect,
it's only a few inches of difference, but it's a huge difference in the outcome. It brings tension. That's the tension that I look for in the image.
Okay.
Dynamics. It brings energy into the image. And then when you are photographing, of course, with ICM, it's impossible to say that, okay, there is a bush. I want to place it exactly in that intersection. You can't. But after 20, 40 frames, you probably will succeed. And it is in that intersection you want. And that's it. And then it makes the image more interesting to look at. And if there isn't anything representational, it may be a color or the light or a certain line that you want to be in that intersection.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be that it represents something, but it's kind of the key element or the key area in the image that sits on that certain place.
So do you think our eye is, yeah, it does. Do you think our eye is drawn to those places visually, or do we draw them using contrast and line?
I think it's both, but I think that our eyes are visually drawn. Our eyes are visually drawn to the lightest spot of the image.
Right.
Wherever it is. And if it's in a corner, then you have problems, because I look at the corner and then I start looking at the walls and the back window.
It takes you out of
TV and I never come back. It's problematic. But after that, I think, I'm not actually sure. I have to say, I don't know if I'm sure there's scientific study on this, but I don't know the results. But I have a feeling that it's the light our eyes go after the first. But if you think of the rule of thirds, it wouldn't be so underlined in art if it didn't have significance.
Right. There was a study done, and it's more about the emotion of where things are placed and our emotional response to it. And those key places are very close to those rule of thirds.
Yeah.
So there is an emotional reaction to certain things placed in certain corners, which is very interesting. And the further from the edge creates a different emotion. If you just take those lines and stretch them out, there's more distance from your subject to the edge. There's books on it, but it's an interesting study.
And also the lower you go, the less importance the thing has.
Yep.
Less interest it creates.
Yeah, it's interesting. The whole thing is very, very interesting. And the more you put this stuff in your head, the more when you're out in the field, you don't necessarily even think about it. You're just kind of responding and reacting. Have you found that to be true?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I have to say that today when I photograph ICMs, I don't consciously concentrate on the framing and the composition. It just comes by nature.
My computer's about to
No problem.
it disappeared off screen for a second here. I got to plug it in. I forgot to do that earlier. That would have been a problem. Okay. Yeah. Problem averted. All right. I got a couple more for you in this episode. So how would you, using all these different techniques and all these things that are, tools that you have in a painter's box, right? That we use as photographers, how would you say the importance of playing and learning the tools are? So exploration, play, how important is that for you personally and as you grow?
I think experimenting and playing, even before you know that there are some tools, is the most important. The open mind and the playfulness and withstanding the failure kind of thing. That it didn't turn out the way you wanted after the first frame. I think those are the most important tools. And then once you overcome that and you gain confidence and you think this is fun, then you can start to analyze these kind of tools like exposure time and depth and dimension and filtering things out and emphasizing and composing and balancing and so on. But I think it would be a good idea if you were in the starting part of your ICM career to forget about those first and then just experiment and play and get the exposure correct. Make sure that your exposure is correct, and then you can play around as much as you can and experiment with various shutter speeds and various movements. And then after you have done a lot of that, if you still think it's fun, then you can start to analyze and use tools.
if you still think it's fun.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of people say, if I say that I do ICM photography, oh, I've tried that, but it just didn't work for me because I took a few shots and it just didn't work for me. They look terrible. And I don't know what the expectations have been.
Yeah.
But I hear a lot that people think that if first 5 frames are not perfect, then it's not fun or it's not for them. But because many people think ICM is easy to do, but it's nothing but easy.
No, it takes a lot more work than you think.
It's not easy at all. It's a misconception that, you just move your camera around and then when you take 5 frames, you realize that it's not just moving your camera around. Then you stop. So I would encourage people to go and experiment, play, have fun, forget about analyzing and thinking about tools and just getting the hang of it.
Yeah.
And then later start to think what you do. First, just do intuitively.
Sounds good. What about and you talked about this a little bit in your last comment where you're talking about having the confidence and building up the resilience, I think might be a good word, where you can take the criticism and with a grain of salt, so to speak. When it comes to a lot of the work that we do, when our heart is in it, there's a sense of vulnerability to putting it out there into the universe that you really have to kind of get over on some level at some point. Like you said, with your photojournalism work, you had to get over the fact that it wasn't a great image and it was being published and it had your name on it. And you were like, please, So, I mean, that might have helped you with this. But when somebody is in that stage where they're trying to find their voice, they haven't quite distilled it, and they have that sense of vulnerability, what are some things that you suggest to help them move past that?
I want to say that listen to your own heart. Go after what you love, and deep down in your heart what you feel that is important to you. Then go after that, because we create for ourselves. I think my ideology is that we create for ourselves primarily, and then if someone likes it, it's great, and if someone hates it, it's their problem. But
and it's okay if they don't like it.
It's okay. I don't like everyone's pictures.
I don't either.
I see a lot of non-ICM images, a lot of traditional photography. I don't like them all. And I don't think those photographers expect that everyone likes their work. So why should we expect, as ICM photographers, why should we expect that everyone likes our work?
That's a good perspective, because it's similar to music.
Yeah.
Some of us are drawn to different types of music, exactly. And that doesn't make the other kind bad, but I just don't like listen. You know what I mean? It's a similar thing.
It's a matter of taste, really. And the background and the life experience of the viewer defines what they like, not the image itself.
Exactly. So
I try to encourage to listen to their heart and not listen to the critics. But of course, maybe the worst then is when you do become your own worst critic, that nothing is good. You have to start to like your work. Otherwise, it can get depressive.
No, and I would think he would make you stop if you.
It would.
Yeah.
Probably. But I have had the same with painting. I love the process of painting, and I love the fact how it takes my thoughts away from the everyday and work, and I don't worry about anything when I paint. But I'm a terrible painter. And for years, I used to paint so that I was painting outdoors. I had my table here, and right next door, I have a fire, like a bonfire. And I paint, and then I tell myself, this is shit, and I put it in the fire, and I do the next one. And I tell myself again, okay, it doesn't look like this landscape, fire, and so on. And I was really expecting way too much of myself with the experience that I had, which is crazy. But now I've learned that the process is the thing and not the end result. So I really enjoy it. The time that I put into it, it's so much fun. I really enjoy it. It's so relaxing and meditative, and it brings me energy and charges my batteries. And I don't care at all what the end result looks like. And you know what the best thing is I have discovered in painting? You can overpaint. It's so deliberating. You take black and you paint over. And it's like, wow.
You just keep using the same canvas.
Exactly. I don't have to put it in the fire anymore.
That is liberating. Same with pixels. You just, you put them in the recycling bin if you really hate them, or put them in an outtakes folder and look at it later when you know how to process different, whatever.
Absolutely. But just getting into the process, enjoy the moment and have fun. That's the thing. And worry about,
A very good advice. Yeah. All right. We're going to wrap this one up, and we're going to come back again with a little bit more about the mystery in the heart of a photograph.
Okay. That sounds excellent.
So before we go, share a little bit more about how people can contact you and learn about what you're doing for the photography community.
Well, if you would like to join my world of ICM photography, I have several offerings. Together, in collaboration with Stephanie Johnson and Marek Patterson, we have the ICM Network community, which is a membership community, lifelong learning platform. We have the New Beginnings workshop, which next starts in the summer. And then for self-study on-demand courses, we also offer the ICM Photo Academy. And all of these you can reach via my website at artistkaisasirén.com.
Thank you. Remember to subscribe or follow the Creative Warriors on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at arielfaithphotography.com. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep the conversation going. Stay curious and have a happy artistic journey. Thank you for listening to the Creative Warriors podcast, the female heart and soul of photography. See you next episode.